Choice number three. Choice number three may seem strange to thee at first. But I want to make it clear that obviously the first thing I chose was a book of poems, and the second thing I chose was a musical album. And now the third thing I'm choosing is a movie because for me, that's a very crucial part of my adventure. Is that at first I started this series and I said, well, maybe I should make it all books or maybe I should make it all albums, and I could do a series like that. But for the first one, I want to be more straightforward with you, and I want to be honest with you, and I want to say that for me, it's not that cut and dry. So everything is going to be from a different medium, and be it a television show or whatever. And this thing is called, obviously, as many people know, it is called The Godfather, with Al Pacino and Marlon Brando. The Godfather #1. Yes, it was very influential for me for a wide variety of reasons. Um, when I saw The Godfather, I remember it was something I was not, and it's not connected with music. Well, it is actually, it is, and you'll see why maybe. But as I've mentioned before on this channel, I am an Italian American, and my Italian American heritage has always meant a lot to me. It has to mean a lot to me in a way because those things in the States, it's like that. I tried to explain, è così. In Italiano, they say è così. It's like this. In the States, ancestry means a lot to people. And sadly enough, one can say The Godfather was really the first time that I was ever really actually in. It's so sad in a way, but it was the first time I certainly ever think I saw Italy on screen. And that was a big deal for me because, Italy is a really ancient country. It's a really old country. I've since actually seen the country in person with my own two eyes, and I can tell thee that I never would have if I hadn't have saw this fucking movie, because it was all the movie. And this movie did a lot more for me than just introduce me to it. Well, Italy and oldness goes hand in hand, but really, this movie introduced me to a very old culture and a very old world. And then it also directly influenced me because I was so into the movie when I first saw it. I remember I saw it maybe when I was 12 or 13 years old. And in the movie, I'm sure many people who are watching this have seen it. Um, First of all, what you see in the movie is you see the assimilation process, and that means the assimilation process is when the immigrants were being assimilated into America. They were becoming Americans. So that was a big deal for me because it was really interesting to see the way that everyone was crowded into New York. I was really more interested in that than I even was in the Don's scene. But another thing, that the Don's whole story, I'm trying to say, like, or Michael Corleone with the girl in Sicily. They get married and then she gets killed, sadly enough. It's a tragedy. It's really a Shakespearean tragedy, this film, and it really does, I think, really, despite the bad image it's given to Italian Americans and Italians in general, I do think it's one of the greatest films of all time. I mean, it really is just a great film, despite the bad. I haven't watched it in some time now, but I've certainly seen it 4 or 5 times, and I know it like the back of my hand. And then it did also lead me into literature a little bit because it led me to the book, which is really one of the few novels written um, early on by an Italian American, Mario Puzo. Mario. And, it was just really influential for me. It was really terribly influential. I was really moved by that movie. And like I said, it just led me into that old world. It helped me become a more accepting of it. It just introduced me to like this lost thing almost. This way of life, this way of living for these people was lost. And it was very bizarre because in The Godfather, the thing that struck me as the most bizarre was the fact that the whole movie actually revolves around and this is deep, I always felt, and I always think of this because now we're having so much trouble in this country and all countries with drug users and drugs and all this BS. And The Godfather, the whole movie is actually about drugs and how much the Don hates them. Um, the Don is not a moral character by any stretch of the word. Um, at all. You know what I'm trying to say? But there is something eerily moral about it at the same time, because he says again and again, the antagonist of the movie is a character called Salazzo the Turk, and he's from Sicily, of course, and he grows the poppy seeds to make the opium or whatever in Sicily, and he gets it shipped to New York, and the Don is based in New York, yada 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 yada. And the movie really touches upon a lot more. I could go on for days about this movie, but the movie really touches upon a lot more than just the story of the Corleone family. It goes on really about, again, it's about the Italian Americans assimilating into America. It's about the Don and his tragedy of his life, about how he wants to rise in society so badly, and it turns out in the end that his efforts were kind of in vain. So that's a huge tragedy. It's about Michael Corleone, who really, it's almost on a Star Wars. Any fans of Star Wars? Star Wars is a big deal now. The space opera thing. A lot of kids like that, and the kids like it because what do they see? They see the spaceships and all this, and but really, what Star Wars is about is really just like The Godfather, except The Godfather is based in Italy and New York, and the Star Wars is in space. But the thing is, Skywalker, or no, Darth Vader is Michael Corleone anyway, because it's about the fall. It's like Satan, like Satan fell from and this Catholic imagery is another big thing in The Godfather, which I love because I was raised Roman Catholic. So all these really old things, like no one says that anymore. I'm Roman Catholic. I don't really hear in America. Nobody says that. I'm trying to, at least where I'm from, nobody really thinks about this too much. It's kind of passing away now. It's the 21st century, but The Godfather gives you this epic image into the 20th century to see where these things were formed, to see how these things were created, to see where these crazy ideas came from. And then you go even further back because it shows Vito Andolini when he was just beginning in, like, I suppose what would have been the early 20th century. So you get to see all of that because the Godfather has flashes to that, I think, to Vito's childhood when he gets shipped off to America, because he leaves Italy really quick. So it was just fascinating. It really is an historical document, and from there I found what a wonderful actor Al Pacino is. I learned a lot about my own history as a human being. I learned so many things from that. Again, it's the web, the road that you trace. And if you want to find it, you shall find it, but you need to follow the path. You need to follow the leaves that were laid. Ok? Devi seguire questi così. You have to follow these things. And so that was it. That was a big deal for me, The Godfather. I went and read the book. I read a couple more books by Mario Puzo. They were some of the best books I've ever read. I'm still meaning to get through all of Mario Puzo's work. He wrote many books. He wrote another one called The Sicilian, which is actually an anti-mafia book. A lot of people think that Mario Puzo was some sort of mafia madman. And also from The Godfather, obviously, you end up learning about all the real-life mafia figures like Lucky Luciano and who else was there? Carlo Gambino and John Gotti, obviously, who shaped New York in the 1980s. And these figures are all sadly quite important for um, Americans, and particularly Italian Americans. And it's a sad history. It seems glamorous at first, guys, but and trust me, when I was 15 years old, I thought it was glamorous and cool, and once you reach adulthood, you realize that it was very, very sad. It was a very big fucking disaster. It was an absolute tragedy. There was absolutely nothing cool about it as far as I'm concerned. And that's what you learn. So you learn all sorts of things from this movie if you're interested in it. And Lucky Luciano was they call him in Time magazine one of the founders of this country or something, because they say he built modern New York. So you look into something like that. His story is absolutely ridiculous. Recently they covered that in an HBO TV series called Boardwalk Empire, which I did follow, and it was a wonderful TV series. Um, and there was one more thing I was trying to remember. Oh, yes. There is a Bob Dylan song that you can tie in with this, and it's called Joey. It's the one song that I know of where Dylan actually wrote, because Dylan, of course, all over the channel. There's one song I know that Dylan actually wrote about Italian Americans. Of course, it has to do with the mob, and it's about this character called Joey, and it's a pretty good song. It's actually a ballad probably one of his longest ballads. It's on the level of Hurricane. It's actually really quite similar, so it's very interesting, and I've been meaning to write about that song in relation to Hurricane for quite some time. So these are two things that I would encourage anyone to check out. Again, The Godfather by Mario Puzo. So number one on the list, Wilderness by Jim Morrison. Number two, Bob Dylan's debut album, Bob Dylan. Number three, The Godfather, directed by Francis Ford Coppola and written by Mario Puzo. Grazie.